No one knows quite how long this has taken than we editors. We would have wished it had taken half the time because it began as such a simple idea. It was over lunch with Gordon Giles after the new A&M had been published, and we thought, wouldn't it be nice to take the NEH and add to it the content of New English Praise and the best of other Catholic hymnody we might find from recent decades. But the hymn book we are launching tonight is not so much a revision, despite its title, as a new creation. It's recognizably in the tradition, both in its contents and in its look and feel. I hope you'll agree with that. But the base text didn't exist. There were no print files, nothing electronic we could update, and we began literally from scratch. Sensibilities had changed, new challenges had arisen. Some lines were not really singable in our present day. And so we went through the NEH, weighing every word before it was transferred to the new book. The musicians measured every musical phrase, and it really has been a very detailed work creating a new compilation from scratch. We considered typefaces and rejected them, layouts, considered them and thought they weren't good enough. And what drove the process was our determination that we should produce the very best we could. And we also made a decision as editors, and all of them are here tonight, I'm very glad to say. We decided that we would come to agreement on everything before anything went ahead. And there were differences to be reconciled, and they weren't always done in a brief exchange over a sandwich lunch. The editors gave their time generously and freely without cost, but we did get through a lot of sandwiches. Sometimes those meetings felt to me like theology seminars. Sometimes I felt I was overhearing learned conversation in a college of music somewhere. At other times, I could have sworn we were a subcommittee of the Liturgical Commission. I was on the committee as the publisher and was trusted with some editorial responsibilities, and I learnt a huge amount from the other editors, and I pay tribute to them this evening. They taught me many, many things, perhaps most especially how to fall in love with a hymn book that I had not grown up with and did not know particularly well. We did all grow weary. We were near despair sometimes. There were times when we thought this day would never come. But mercifully, we never felt all those things all together. There was always somebody to bring us back to the task. And I would, again, really like to pay tribute to those editors, Gordon, Hugh, Simon, Jonathan, Martin. We're missing Tim Ruffer this evening of the RSCM, who was a steady and calming presence throughout, pouring oil on troubled waters, and we did run into a few, pouring lubricating oil when we got stuck in our own conversations and decision making. I'd like to thank Rowan Williams for his very generous and wonderful foreword and his translation of Welsh texts. We acknowledge also Andrew Parker, who typeset the book and brought his own demands to our process, also wanting the best for the book. And I know it's invidious to single out individuals, but special thanks must go to Jonathan Goodall, who bore the brunt of the proofreading and checking and editorial work in its final stages, And lastly, to Martin, I don't know where he's gone, who was a kind of anchor for us all throughout. He inspired us, and he is a walking embodiment of the tradition of the English hymnal. And his knowledge of which hymn to sing, not only on which day, but also what time of day you should sing it, was just astonishing in its breadth, and it's evident in the table of suggested hymns that he has compiled, and which you'll find in the indexes, the largest table of its kind I've ever come across. And he kept us to that desire for the very best. And with this publication, he steps down from his role as the English Hymnal Company chairman. After 40 years, I believe, he has said he'll see us through as the other editions come in the spring. They are not going to take us long because they're all derived from the book we're launching tonight. Martin, I imagine you feel a sense of relief at that, but please also be aware of our deepest gratitude to you for your wisdom, our heartfelt thanks for your friendship and encouragement, and our love. And with that, I would like to hand over to Martin to lead us in our singing from the sampler. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go up into the pulpit eventually, because I think it's easier to be seen but we need to get some air into our lungs. So we're going to start by singing hymn number 7 in the hymnal. It's in the sampler. It's probably the best known of the hymns from other hymn books. I have just a couple of words to say about it after we've sung it. So the organist won't play it right through, whereas for most of the other hymns, he will play through the whole of the tune first, because there'll be many people here for whom that is the first time they've heard that piece of music. So we won't stand for all the hymns, but we'll stand for this one, certainly, the first one in your sampler, which is an hymn for Advent, and we're almost there. do look at the notes on the pages. There's usually a giveaway somewhere in there, and you will see at the bottom of that page that the original harmony version may be found at hymn 415. The original is harmony version by Richard Terry, is the tune he wrote for O Perfect Love, the wedding hymn, and I think the New English Hymnal was the first hymn book to include that tune to that hymn, and it is still in the Revised English Hymnal to that hymn, but a unison version has been provided as well, which is the one that we've just sung. You've heard enough about delays. I have to say I seriously wondered in my prayer whether God wanted this hymn book to be published or not. It seemed it would have a wonderful period and then something would stop something. And just to give a tiny illustration, well, not so tiny if you count COVID, and at the time one of our number was living in New Zealand, so Zoom wasn't very practical, and Zoom is never practical when you could have sat round a table and people could have changed their mind and you could have come to a decision. But if you depend on email, all methods of modern group communication seem to have the one aim of slowing everything down. But little things like, well, not little things, finding only a matter of months ago in the summer that the copyright holder for one item, which had already been approved, they changed to another copyright holder and they didn't approve of the item. So suddenly you have a space to fill. And then somebody else who had been asked before, again, another copyright holder, the estate of somebody, had been asked if we might use a very wonderful Celtic tune for our hymn book, said yes in principle, and then when they saw the hymn, which fitted the melody perfectly well, clearly decided they didn't want this music in a hymn book. And then somebody else decided that they didn't give permission for the arrangement of a hymn that we'd chosen. And you think to yourself, well, anybody can do an arrangement. Well, it had to be done within 24 hours. Those sorts of things happened. And I have to say, I think between us we were just holding on, because when we heard, first of all, that the printers wouldn't have the book ready by the initial date and then another date, and then it still really isn't ready. The ones that you've got, yes, it's ready, and it will be at the warehouse next week, but it had to be delivered direct to the church today for this launch. So those of us who are editors, the first time we've seen the book is at exactly the same time that you've seen it. We aren't going to sing every item. I don't want to draw attention to every feature of the book, but a good starting point is that opening paragraph of the preface, which I'm not going to read, but that does set the principles behind our book. It is obviously very familiar. You've noticed the colour. It's very much still in the Vaughan Williams musical tradition. All those tunes that we've all known for ages and ages and ages, we've only known them because he collected them. I don't think anyone would be able to do it now. But all the popular, well-known hymns are only well-known because we sing them. Well, we've enlarged on that, and we're not going to sing it because it's too long. But the next item in the book, number 66, is another item, number 21, sorry, it has another Hertfordshire traditional melody, arranged by Vaughan Williams, to a hymn which is very well known. I point it out simply because it is part of the enormous Advent Christmas section in the book. People have asked, is We Three Kings in? Well, it isn't. Is Good King Wenceslas in? No, it isn't. We have the largest Christmas section of any book other than Carols, Ancient and Modern, which is a very, 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 very large book. The Christmas section in any hymn book never suffices for every congregation. That's why people have carol sheets and service sheets at Christmas. Your favourite might not be in. I think we've got most of the well-known ones. As I say, we have, I think, 40 items, which are Christmas items, 37 under Christmas, and 3 elsewhere in the book, which are sung at Christmas, and that's one of them, but it's in Advent. If you're looking for It Came Upon the Midnight Clear, which never mentions Christmas at all, you will find it in the book under Michaelmas. It's a hymn about the angels. We have a very large section for the church's year. General hymns begin at 426 in this book. They began at 331 in the New English Hymnal, so that makes 90 more hymns for the seasons of the church's year and for the sacraments and other things. It isn't just a Church of England book, which is why in our liturgical material we haven't stuck strictly to common worship. It's also why we didn't provide responsorial psalms. There can't be enough in a hymn book this size. And which translation do you use? In Scotland and Wales and Ireland, they do not use the common worship psalter. And we have to remember that churches in these islands and also elsewhere in the world have different psalters. So our own use of psalmody reflects traditions other than that of common worship. I'd like to invite you, though, now to sing hymn number 81, and we're going to sing it to the first tune. And will you play it over completely, Michael? So you stand to sing this one. You get a lot of sitting down in a minute. So will you stand to sing the first tune to hymn 89? What is very well known in this church is that I cannot handle modern technology. I don't know where the microphone went, but it's back now. It's an interesting hymn. I don't think any other hymn does that. Traces you from Ash Wednesday to the Easter Vigil of Easter, from ashing through to the new waters of the font at Easter. And it's particularly suitable, as it says, in those churches where the Gospel of the Transfiguration is read on a Sunday in Lent. That is the case in the lectionary in use in many churches. There is a second tune which is much better known than the one we've sung, as there often is when we introduce a new tune, and even that is in more than once, in a different key, a different harmonization. Our treatment of plain song is definitely quite special. Most books have abandoned plain song notation, that they are the square notes that you'll see on the left-hand side of your page on the thing, which is the notation that was used for plain song originally. We had a lot of requests that we wouldn't abandon that, and so we have kept it. But we understand that not everybody can read that sort of music. So on the right-hand side, above the accompaniment, because plain song isn't always sung with accompaniment, but we shall be singing it mostly with accompaniment tonight, which will soften it slightly. The austerity of the melody is sometimes softened by gentle accompaniment. You'll see what are called stemless notes. Everybody, actually, that's the proper name, everybody calls them blobs, because that's what they look like. And there you can see on a conventional stave where the notes are going. So we're not going to sing the whole of this hymn, and we'll remain seated to sing it because it's a much gentler hymn. We're going to sing the first 3 verses and the last verse, and just to give ourselves a little bit of variation, we'll all sing the first verse. Those of you on my right, your left-hand side of the church, sing verse 2. Those on the other side sing verse 3, and then we come together for the final verse. I think it's a fairly well-known tune, and you've got the music, and you're not going to learn it if you've never sung it before by it being played over. So we'll just go straight into it if you give a note. The royal banners forward go. hymn has been corrected to conform to the version in the English hymnal at 1 or 2 points, and the error unspotted until 30 years after the book has been printed and has not been corrected ever, is the heresy in the last verse. Sorry, can you hear me now? I told you I couldn't do. The text is closer to the version in the English hymnal rather than in the New English hymnal, particularly the end of verse 3. It isn't the universal Lord anymore. It's restored the very important concept of the nations. And the heretical ending has been corrected, which no one has ever said and it pointed it out. But the New English hymnal has thy cross in the third line. And the eternal three-in-one, as far as I know, didn't have a cross. It's the cross in the original, and it has been corrected. There's also an error, if you want to look for it, in the New English hymnal. There's an error in one of the verses of praise to the holiest in the height. It's been corrected. I'll leave you to find that. The next hymn is another translation of The Strife is O'er, and it's quite remarkable because of the tune. There's nothing wrong with the Palestrina-based tune of The Strife is O'er, but this is an alternative use of the same text. And you will notice who the composer of the tune is. If I asked you what you knew about Dom Gregory Murray, you would immediately think, I did, certainly, of responsorial psalms and of his mass setting, which must be one of the most popular in use in ordinary parishes. He was actually, with Richard Terry, the Vaughan Williams of the Westminster Hymnal in its 1940 revision. That is, they did what Vaughan Williams did in the English hymnal, putting all the much-loved sentimental tunes from the evening hymns, for example, into an appendix. And the Westminster Hymnal copied that practice by putting all the tunes Roman Catholics loved, like the tune to Sweet Sacrament Divine, into the appendix and provided much more worthy German chorales or something instead. Well, of course, they failed in that, but it does mean a lot of the stuff that replaced what was in the appendix was their own work. And there are a number of Gregory Murray tunes in the English hymnal, the Revised English Hymnal, and this is one of them. It's an Easter hymn, so we better stand to sing it. The translation is by John Mason Neale. You'll find his name at the end of lots of Latin and Greek hymns in hymn books. He was one of the compilers of Hymns Ancient and Modern for the 1861 edition, and was the first to introduce these Latin and Greek ancient hymns into English. So that's an old translation of the hymn. I talked about copyright problems and how difficult it was really sometimes to get people to change their own work. Not so with the lovely Timothy Dudley Smith, who has written probably more hymns for the Anglican tradition in the 20th and 21st century than anyone else. He wrote this hymn, 206, for the Cathedral Church of St. Paul in Melbourne in Australia. And I don't know why he submitted it to us, but he did. And a very useful hymn it is indeed, because hymns generally about St. Paul are about his conversion. And people with a patronal festival, there are many churches dedicated to St. Paul, need something more than just that. And the great feast of St. Peter and St. Paul on June the 29th has only one hymn which brings the two together, an ancient office hymn, and that's why it does it. And so you're likely to sing hymns about Peter alone, and now you can sing a hymn about Paul alone. We found it a little bit too long, and so we asked if we could shorten it, and he looked at it and he said, "What do you mean?" And there was the odd line that we didn't like or didn't like as much as the rest, and in the end we conflated two verses. We took the first 4 lines of one verse and the second 4 lines of another verse. "That's great," he said. "That has improved the hymn." This is an experienced hymn writer. "That has improved the hymn. This shall be its final version." So it's to the Revised English Hymnal that you have to look to find this hymn now, unless you happen to have it on a piece of paper in Melbourne, Australia, and you will have the final, authorised by the author, version of it. We're going to stand to sing that as well, and then we'll have quite a bit of sitting down. So please stand up for hymn 206. Can you play it right through, Michael? To 4, if you feel so moved. As far as I know, As far as I know, that's a specially composed tune. In other words, the composer wrote it for those words, and you can see how well his painting of the words fits the melody very well indeed. There are a lot of office hymns in the Revised English Hymnal. It's always been a feature of the English Hymnal, and it's one of the reasons many people buy the book. Cathedrals and many parish churches sing daily services, and actually, particularly evening prayer, said publicly in church, has become more and more common in the week in the last 10, well, since the year 2000, and though it's not part of common worship, the bishop's revision of the office provided an office of morning and evening prayer, which could be said corporately as an alternative to the one in the Book of Common Prayer. And it's the custom to sing an office hymn, a hymn which sets the tone of the day. And the new book has provided a complete weekday cycle, hymns for every day of the week, hymns for midday, a selection of hymns, seasonal and ordinary, for Compline, and many hymns for Saints' Days, which had not got one in the old hymn book. The problem with newer hymns, and the one we're going to sing is a newer hymn, it's composed in the present century, is that they are not to standard plain song meters. Occasionally, as if in this parish they had a little peak of the office hymn for Christ the King last Sunday, and that actually does have a melody which, although it's not a hymn, is a part of a sequence which fits the meter 7-7-7-7, which was the meter of the hymn. And this is a common meter hymn, and there are one or two hymns in common meter which are modern compositions, and plain song melodies in existence don't fit. So I say we, Simon Lindley and Hugh Williams wrote a common meter tune which could be sung to, and both are in the book, to these more modern hymns. We haven't pretended they're plain song by doing square notes, but we have tried, both we, again means Hugh and Simon, have tried to take the rhythms and gentleness of plain song in writing a hymn, in a modal hymn in that style. So remain seating, and we'll do the same with this one as we did with the Royal Banners. If we all sing the first verse and the last verse, and this side of the church sings verse 2, and that side verse 3. The hymn didn't have a doxology, which was rather odd for Stanbrook Abbey, so Jonathan Goodall, one of our editors, and he's here, all office hymns must have a doxology, so it has one in which you will see he takes a rather interesting image of the cross, and it's standing firm in a turning world to bring the hymn to its conclusion. So are we just going to plough ahead with it, Michael? All office hymns have a plain song tune or a modal tune like that one where a plain song tune isn't available, and a metrical tune as well. The ones for the days of the week enabled us to put in some of the tunes from the 1933 English hymnal, which had got rather lost. Good tunes they are. They're not going to be great hits, but it does enable the tune to be in the book and to be sung by those congregations in the week that want to sing a new contemporary metrical tune. In every case, an easy alternative is suggested, because we appreciate that 6 or 7 people at evening prayer sitting in the choir stalls in the week has got to be able to sing them to a tune that they know. So the long meter ones, all the evening ones, will go to Tallis's Canon. All of them will go to, all the morning ones will go to Awake My Soul, or New Every Morning is the Love. Wareham, they'll all go to. So there's 4 or 5 well-known tunes to congregations can be used for these hymns at small groups in the week when there's no organ or any other instrument to accompany. We're not going to sing the next 2 hymns. Another Gregory Murray, and this is by accident really, because someone refused to give us permission to use their version of this arrangement of this very well-known tune at the last minute. And so it's all very well for everybody to say, well, anybody can write an arrangement to a well-known tune. Well, yes, but can you do it in 24 hours? And there was, in the Westminster Hymnal, a perfectly singable, easy version of this pilgrimage hymn to the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's an English, there are endless versions of this hymn. Some of them have 30 or 40 verses because they're sung in procession at Walsingham or Lourdes or all sorts of other places. But this one is an English hymn by the Venerable Bede, translated by Ronald Knox, and it does all the biblical occasions on which Mary was present in the New Testament. So it is a hymn that can be sung by anybody to a well-known tune. It's called Pilgrimage Hymn because it sort of imagines you're outside really and walking around somewhere singing this lovely hymn. There's another example at 296 of an office hymn. This is a retranslation of a Latin hymn, which we liked because it sounds very modern. Well, it is very modern as a translation, and yet is faithful to the Latin. It's suggested for use on festivals of contemporary martyrs. I don't think any of us thought when we started this book that we would need to provide a section, a small section, yes, but a section for those who are suffering persecution, or for those who are being martyred at the present time. And sadly, both of those occasions are needed. There are 2 excellent hymns by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which are superb texts, which can be used for, particularly in times of persecution. And this is an example of an office hymn, which could be used for any martyr, but I'd rather like to think that this is going to be the one that is the one sung when they are very recent martyrs of our own day or the immediate past. 364, if you look at it, takes up 4 pages because it does have the hymn in a translation, and then on the next page it has the original. And the reason being, the original is in Welsh. When we first started looking at the book, we did think of providing hymns in foreign languages as well as their English texts, where the original was foreign. So, for example, Thine Be the Glory is a French hymn translated into English. We did think of putting the original French, the same with Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Creation in German, but it did end up looking rather a token affair. It was quite difficult to find a lot of hymns in a lot of languages, or at least 3 or 4 European languages. So we renounced the idea in the end of that. But then we did remember that Welsh is a language of these islands. There is one country in which it is fairly widely spoken and sung. And sung. There is a Welsh language hymn book. We sing lots and lots and lots of Welsh tunes. Vaughan Williams again. But we don't really know very many Welsh texts. The one I suppose we do know well is, why can't I think of it? Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer, which is in the book, but then we'll have the Welsh original after it. And our hope is that in Wales, where both languages are spoken, in congregations, there are many Welsh-speaking and more bilingual congregations in Wales, that both languages will just be sung simultaneously. You don't need to provide a token verse and say, well, let's have verse 3 in Welsh, just to prove that we're inclusive. The whole lot can be sung in either language. So I hope that when in English congregations you suddenly find that there's somebody Welsh there on a Sunday morning and is picking up his his or her Revised English Hymnal and belts it all out in Welsh, you will feel very privileged to know that someone is singing the original version. I don't know how many of you are Welsh speakers. My guess is that our one definite Welsh speaker is playing the organ. So he's not going to set a good example. But if any of you really do speak or sing Welsh, then by all means sing the Welsh version. You'll need to play it all the way through, Hugh, at least apart, perhaps not the Alleluia at the end of the hymn, but the rest of it. It is very Welsh, which is what we want. when I asked Welsh friends which hymns ought to go in, that was number one. That is a very, very popular hymn in Wales. It also, as you note by the section it's in, Times and Seasons, Creation, answers the request for more hymns about God's creation. And we've been very careful about including those, and that is a perfect example. It isn't a hymn about the planet warming or just a sentimental hymn about creation. In that wonderful Welsh way, it urges God that a day shouldn't pass for the glories of the earth to be revealed, a song to be sung, and above all, that there should never be an age without a cross or crown of thorn. It's a magnificent hymn. I can tell it's hard for me and you to learn, but it's very much sung in Wales, so it's worth learning. We're back on Dom Gregory Murray again. I did mean us to stand for that hymn, but it doesn't matter, we haven't. This is the second tune. Any guesses as to which is the first tune for this hymn? For Lead Kindly Light? Go on. We had enough complaints about the fact that we might even consider not putting it in. It's the Harris tune. But it is difficult for congregations to sing. It's a very important text, this poem, and it does need a tune which is fairly straightforward as one which is glorious but difficult to learn. So we'll still sit down, but do you mind playing it through? But he won't play the repeat. If you'll see that the first two couplets, each ending "Lead thou me on," are sung to the same melody. So in playing it over, Hugh will just play that melody once and then the melody for the last two lines. But we do need to sing the melody of the first two lines, or 1.5 lines. We need to sing it twice. Number 534 is an example of modern tune and text by Bernadette Farrell. She's a Leeds-based Roman Catholic, and her songs, and they are songs rather than hymns, though the line between them is quite difficult to draw, and they're very popular in many of the congregations that will buy the Revised English Hymnal because they're in other hymn books. So they may not be your cup of tea, but they are not rubbish by any means. It's no good dismissing a modern text to a modern style folk tune as something which is somehow unworthy. This is, in any case, a paraphrase of Psalm 139, one of the most wonderful psalms in the Psalter. So we're going to sing it again. It's in unison, so it's easy. Will you play it right through, Hugh, and then we will sing the whole lot, still sitting down. 585 is another example. I'm off now, yes. Is another example of a classic text by Thomas Campion. I don't know what tune this was. He wrote songbooks, and sometimes they're just poems, but mostly they've got a tune to be played on the lute. I've no idea what it was set to originally in whichever book of airs this comes from. One verse is missing because modern congregations would just refuse to sing it. If you want to know what that is, then you'll have to look up Thomas Campion and this poem, and you'll see why it wouldn't go down very well in any congregation at all. Doesn't mean it's not true, but it's not something that we could all stand and sing about. It's set to a William Harris tune, and there is another alternative tune, Song 13, Gibbon's Song 13, which is well known, so if your congregation didn't want to learn a new tune, though why are you buying a new hymn book if you don't want to learn a new tune? Please learn a few new tunes. Right, Hugh. A hymn book isn't just a hymn book. It is, of course, for singing. Thank you, Father. A hymn book isn't just a hymn book. It is, of course, for singing corporately together with others. But many people no longer possess a prayer book, and a good hymn book, and I think the Revised English Hymnal does excel in this, just as our predecessors did, provides many beautiful poems on which you can meditate in your home, in your prayer time. When you can't find words, look at the hymn book and look at some classic texts, and they're not all 300, 400 years old, and you will find a great aid to your prayer life. Because it's more than just for singing in worship, do encourage your churches to buy copies of the hymn book and not to pull down more and more trees to produce complex service sheets for Sunday services which have 16 or 20 pages and every word of the service in them. So you never need to look up, actually. You can just have your head down for the whole of the time in church. Please don't do that. And I'm not just being trendy and environmental. It does mean a lot. Our misuse of paper is terrible, and to recycle it uses gallons and gallons of water, and you needn't have pulled the trees down in the first place if you use and reuse. I'm going to do a little plug for this parish. This is what you get when you come to church at St. James's, not for a carol service, not for a special service, not for a Christmas service when there are hundreds of people that have never been to church before, we think, though that's not true, but for an ordinary Sunday service on 4 pages, and they're reusable Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Yes, there are special ones for periods, like we shall have a special one in Advent because it's got the Gloria there, and we don't want somebody who's never been to church wondering why we're missing it out. It won't be in. But on 4 pages, every word that the congregation needs to say, and this is a church that gets a lot of people who are new to the Christian faith. We had 12 adult baptisms on Sunday for people who discovered the Christian faith here, and they were perfectly able to discover it through a simple leaflet like that. That's one version. That's another version with a congregational Gloria. The same thing, just 4 pages, please, not 16 or 20. And don't let the vicar just make you think that the only hymns that there are the ones, the 3 that are on the service sheet. This anthology of a hymn book belongs to all of you. Can be used for your own prayer as well as for singing in church. So make I know this sounds like a sales pitch, it is in a sense, but it's ethical too. Make that investment. Go on your way out, look at our hymn shelves and see how they're all dropping to bits. Because they're 35 years old, but they're still there because they're used in the service of the church, which is what they're meant for. That's the end of that particular nag. We're going to sing now, we're going to leave out 600 so that we finish with that. We're just going to sing 2 more items. 635 is one of, you can see 2 of them there, Taizé chants. The success of the Taizé community, particularly with young people all over the world, is absolutely immense. Young people love these chants, and old people get to like them. We can't always have the ones that you want. Taizé is very possessive of their wonderful heritage, and they have decided that they don't want to give permission for the most popular of them, which is Lord, Hear My Prayer. Well, that's it. It's not in, not because we didn't like it, but because it's one of those things. There are 12, I think, plus a version of what I call the Benedicite. I suppose you should call it Song of the Three or something, or Benedicite or something. The lovely canticle of the going through the whole of creation. In the version that people like me know, it begins, "O all ye works of the Lord, bless you the Lord." But there's a lovely Taizé version of that too, and you'll find that in the hymn book. So we're going to sing 635 3 times, because it's a sort of background to prayer. We had a very successful, for a time, but COVID stopped it, service at which these sort of chants were used on a Sunday evening, and it was very popular with young people because it's quiet and meditative. You don't need a musical instrument, actually. You could use a guitar for the chords, another instrument, a flute, or it fits any sort of music. So most of you, I would think, have known them and heard them, but we're just going to sing one as an example, and that's 635, and we'll sing it through 3 times. They will be, I think, a tremendous enrichment to our book. They're very liturgical, very meditative, very English hymnal in feel, and yet they are, of course, international and will be known by people from all over the world. The penultimate item is 651, which is just an illustration of what is in the liturgical section. The English hymnal has always had a liturgical section. In 1906, it had all what are called the propers of the Mass, the introits, graduals, communions, offertories, things such as the reproaches, the Lent and Advent prosas, all sorts of material, all of which, other than the propers, is still there. But this, you will find everything in there for the keeping of the Church's year, and especially Holy Week. One thing that was lacking in the New English Hymnal was just a version of the hymn which is always sung, very often by a choir, but during the washing of the feet. So we haven't got a cantor, so you'll have to sing the verses as well. I'll start you off on the. Are we going to sing the refrain in Latin or in English? All right, we'll sing the refrain in Latin and the verses in English. I'm only going to sing first half of that, but still. Ubi caritas et amor, Deus Iries, by the love of Christ we have been brought together. Let us find in your gladness and the pleasure Well, I hope that's given you some taste of the variety of items in the book. We're going to finish with a hymn, which again, because it's a new tune for almost everybody, certainly a new tune for me, an alternative which is much better known is Given, but it's a tune by what must be the master of English Anglican church music, Herbert Howells. There are 5 Herbert Howells tunes in the Revised English Hymnal. There's Michael, All My Hope on God is Founded. There's Salisbury, For Holy Spirit Ever Dwelling. What are the others? Oh, the city at Sancti Civitas. And there are 2 new hymns, one called Kensington and one called Newnham, which as far as I know don't exist in any hymn book in Britain at all. One of them appears in a Canadian ecumenical hymn book and one appears in an American interdenominational, mainly Protestant. I think it's called it's got Reformed somewhere. So these tunes are new to English congregations, and we're going to finish with the last one, and then I see some of you have already had something to eat and drink, but if you haven't, like me, there'll be something, I hope, still left to eat and drink, and certainly plenty to drink. So we'll stand and sing this last hymn, and then you can mingle and buy lots and lots of books